Welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys for hanging with me on this Wednesday night. And if you've went out of your way to like, comment, or subscribe, that helps me and the channel out a lot. So thank you guys for doing that. Now, we are in the summertime, and there are a few things that I want to tell you about the summer that have confused me for decades. And I've kind of figured out what to do in these different situations. So things that may seem like they're obvious and you should be fishing there, maybe it is not. So I'm going to give you a few different instances where it may look really good, but it actually is really bad. And the first thing we're going to start with is bait. Now, I think you want to be around the bait. You want to follow the bait. There's times of the year where the bait, like in the fall, is the most important thing you can possibly be doing. But there's also times of the year where we have an excess amount of bait and you don't want to be around it because there's no way that a bass would choose your lure over the 10,000 minnows that's swimming around their head. So it's one of those things where it can be either really good or really bad, but there are a few different instances, and it's not just bait fish. It may be mayflies. So when we have our mayfly hatches, you may think, okay, this is the time where we need to go to the bank and fish a popper and, imitate bluegills that are eating the mayflies that are going to draw the bass. But that's not always the best case. What will happen a lot of times is there will be so much food that a artificial lure just is not going to work. And that's the same thing when you go back into a bay or you go into a creek or you get around an area that just has minnows where you can see them everywhere. It's really hard to get those fish to bite. That's typically an obvious situation where I need to go somewhere else. I want to be around a certain amount of bait, but too much bait can be a bad thing. And another thing, a totally different instance, but another thing that's similar to that is when you see hundreds of boats kind of all doing the same thing, you have to kind of take note that obviously there's some fish there, but you may not want to do that. You're just going to get into the rotation that they're all in, and just because they're all out there fishing the same ledge or they're all ledge fishing or something like that doesn't necessarily mean that those fish are easy to catch or that they are catching anything. So there's a couple of things to combat that issue as well. So when I get out there, there's always going to be people fishing offshore this time of year for good reason. That's where most of the fish are at, but you also have guys, splitting up the fish. So that causes chaos on the water. You have seen the drama and the fights and everything else that happens, but underneath the water, there's also fish that are very heavily pressured. And if you're not a great offshore fisherman, you're probably not gonna be able to catch those fish. So what typically I do is I look around shallow places that are near good community hole type offshore places. So good offshore type places are usually pretty obvious, ledgy type spots where your contours on your map are real close together. They're typically touching some of the deepest water you have on your lake or river, and they come up to a shallow spot. Those are great places. Unfortunately, our mapping, our technology has gotten so good that those are now mostly community holes. So what I will do is I will find all the best shallow places around those community holes and not even go out and bother fishing those community holes. So what I mean by that is a fish that is being pressured and can't really rest because it's constantly being hit in the head, with the guy with the forward-facing sonar, or you just have someone that keeps dredging a crankbait through there, or a swim bait, or a football head jig, or whatever it may be. Those fish have no problem swimming 500 yards, 600, 700, 800 yards to the closest cover. So if it's bank grass like water willow, or a dock, or maybe just a shallow drain, if you have some type of grass in your lake, they may just get in that grass, get totally away from the ledge. So there are typically going to be one or two bass near those type places. So you can basically run that as a pattern. Just run down the lake. The community hole is pretty easy to find, and just go and look around those shallow areas that are near those community holes. And depending on where you're at in the lake, a lot of the ledge spots will be kind of in the same area. So typically down the lake is where most of the good offshore fishing is in most lakes. And the plus minus side of that is that shallow bite down there is usually not as good as it is up the river when you have a lot of fishing pressure, but you're going to have these sneaky little places where fish are going to find refuge. They're going to get away, and you can typically go in there and catch them shallow. Now, if you have grass in your lake, you can attest to this, that when the fish get in the post spawn and they first move out to the main river channel, they are following the bait. That's just what the bait does. It spawns near the main river channel, or once it's done spawning, it goes out to the main river channel. It wants to get to the deepest possible water that it can live. Now, the bass do the same thing. They follow that bait out there, and they stay out there for however long the fishing pressure pushes them back. So if you have grass in your lake, like hydrilla or milfoil, some type of submergent grass, bass are going to be on the ledges May or June, depending on what time of year, how the weather is that year rather. And then they are going to move into the grass. So like the July, August time is going to be fish in that grass, and they're going to live in that grass until it dies, and then it's going to change it up a little bit. But that's from fishing pressure. There's really no other reason. The bait's still out there. There's plenty of reasons for those fish to still live out there, but that fishing pressure will move them. So when you go to a lake, you see a lot of bait. That doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to catch a lot of fish. And when you go out there and you just see everybody fishing offshore, that's not necessarily, I need to be out there offshore with everyone else. There's still a shallow bite going on, and with everybody out there, they are still pushing fish shallow. So those are some confusing things. I've been out saltwater fishing a little bit, and I'm trying to take things that I know in bass fishing and apply them to saltwater. It's a totally different game, so that doesn't really help me a whole lot. But are these questions that I ask myself when I'm out there saltwater fishing that I really don't know the answer to? These are questions that you may have when you're freshwater fishing, and those are the answers. So try that, guys. Good luck to you, and I'll see you on the water.